Bantam Doubleday Dell Audio Publishing presents Sticks and Scones by Diane Mott Davidson. Read for you by Cherry Jones. Nighttime noises are torture. When a midnight wind shrieks through our window jambs, or footsteps clomp past the house, I think it could be anything. Once a snowbank slid from our roof and thundered onto the deck. I awoke, heart pounding, convinced I'd been shot. It isn't logical, of course, but living in terror for 7 years had not made me the most rational of thinkers, least of all when roused from sleep. When I awoke at 4 o'clock on Monday morning, February 9th, those years of dread were long over. Still, I was certain I'd heard a tiny scraping noise, like boots chafing against ice. Think, I warned myself, don't panic. Heart pulsing, throat dry, I waited for my brain to clear, for the sound to come again. My husband Tom was out of town. Even when he's at home, noise rarely interrupts his slumber. Tom is a big, hulking cop and isn't afraid of much. But now all was quiet. No sound emanated from Arch's room down the hall. 2 months from turning 15, my son slept so soundly even a howling blizzard would not rouse him. On the first floor, our bloodhound Jake was not growling. This was a good sign. Wait. Another unmistakable scrape was followed by a tiny crack. My eyes traveled to the bedside table, and I reached stealthily for the portable phone. One more sound, and I would speed dial the sheriff's department. I shivered, waited, and longed for the heavy terrycloth robe hanging in my closet, an early Valentine's present from Tom. "Caterers need to rest after cooking, Miss G," he'd said. "Wrap yourself in this when I'm gone and pretend it's me." Of course, I would have much preferred Tom himself to the robe. For the past week, he'd been in New Jersey working a case. There, he reported the weather was rainy. In Aspen Meadow, I told him in our evening calls, each day had brought more snow. I propped myself up on my elbow and listened intently. In the light cast by the street lamp outside, I could just make out my own reflection in our mirror. Blonde curly hair, dark eyes, 34-year-old face just a tad round from an excess of chocolate. It was a face that had been happy for almost 2 years since I'd married Tom. Back in my old life, my ex-husband had often stumbled in late. I'd become used to the drunken harangues, the flaunted infidelities, the midnight arguments. Of course, I absolutely believed in Tom's fidelity, even if he had been both secretive and preoccupied lately. Before he left, he even seemed low. I hadn't known how to help. Try as I might, I was still getting used to being a cop's wife. 5 minutes went by with no sound. My mind continued to meander. I wondered again about Tom. 6 a.m. on the East Coast. Was he up? Was he still planning on flying back this morning? Had he made any progress in his investigation? The case Tom was working on involved the hijacking on a Furman County road of a FedEx delivery truck. The driver had been killed. Only one of the suspected 3 hijackers had been arrested. His name was Ray Wolfe, and he was now in the same cell block as my ex-husband, Dr. John Richard Corman. The jerk, as his other ex-wife and I called him, was currently serving a sentence for assault. During Arch's weekly visit, John Richard had boasted of his acquaintance with Ray Wolfe, the famous killer hijacker. How low things had sunk, I thought, when a father reveled in his own criminal infamy. I shivered again and tried not to think of the threats my ex-husband had sent from jail. They'd been both implied and overt. "When I get out of here, I'll set you straight, Goldy." He said to Arch, "You can tell your mother your father has a plan." I jumped at the sound of a third, louder crack. Downstairs, Jake let out a tentative woof. I hit the phone's power button as an explosion rocked our house. What was that? My brain reeled. Cold and trembling, I realized I'd fallen off the bed. A gunshot? A bomb? A grenade? An earthquake? Downstairs, glass crashed to the floor. What the hell is going on? I clutched the phone and tried to call for Arch. Unfortunately, my voice no longer seemed to be working. Below, our security system shrieked. I cursed as I made a tripping dash down the dark hall. The noise had been a gunshot. It had to have been. Someone had shot at our home. At least one downstairs window had been shattered, of that I was certain. Where is the shooter now? Where is my son? Arch! I squawked in the dark hallway. My voice sounded far away, dwarfed by the alarm. Are you all right? Can you hear me? Yelling that it was me, Mom, I stumbled through my son's bedroom door. Arch was sitting up in bed, his toast-brown hair fanned out, and his hastily donned tortoiseshell glasses askew. He clutched a raised sword, a gleaming foil used for his school fencing practice. I punched the phone buttons for 911, but I was trembling so badly I messed it up. Now the phone was braying in my ear. Panic tensed Arch's face as he leaned toward the watery light and squinted at me. Mom, what was that? Shuddering, I fumbled with the phone again and finally pushed the automatic dial for the Furman County Sheriff's Department. I don't know, I managed to shout to Arch. Better get on the... With the phone, I gestured toward the floor. We'll be right there, announced a distant telephone voice after I babbled where we were and what had happened. Mrs. Schulz, the operator instructed, lock the bedroom door. We should have a car there in less than 15 minutes. Please, God, I prayed, disconnecting. With numb fingers, I locked Arch's door, then eased to the floor beside him. The front doorbell rang. My eyes locked with Arch's. Neither of us moved. The bell rang again, insistently. A male voice shouted, Goldy? Arch, it's Bill. 3 other guys are here with me. Bill? Oh, Bill Quincy from next door. Goldy? Bill boomed. We're armed. I took a steadying breath. This was Colorado, not England or Canada or some other place where folks don't keep guns, and wield them freely. In Aspen Meadow, no self-respecting gun owner who heard a shot at 4 a.m. was going to wait to be summoned. Goldy? Bill Quincy hollered again. Answer me or I'm breaking down the door. All right, I called, I'm coming. I told Arch to stay put and tentatively made my way down the stairs. Freezing air swirled through the first floor. In the living room, glass shards glittered where they'd landed on the couch, chairs, and carpet. I turned off the deafening alarm, flipped on the outside light, and swung open the door. 4 grizzled, goose-down-jacketed men stood on my front step. I was wearing red flannel PJs and my feet were bare, but I told them law enforcement was en route and invited them in. Clouds of steam billowed from the men's mouths as Bill insisted his companions weren't budging, and Bill's posse settled creakily onto our frosted porch. The men's weapons, 2 rifles and 2 pistols, glinted in the ghostly light. Bill announced that he intended to go through the house to see if the shooter had broken in. I should wait until he'd inspected the first floor, he ordered, pushing past me without further ceremony. Bill stomped resolutely through the kitchen and dining room, then returned to the hallway and cocked his head at me. I tiptoed behind him to the kitchen. He shouted a warning into the basement, then banged down the steps. If the intruder was indeed inside, there could be no mistake that my neighbor intended to roust him out. Jake bounded up to Arch's room ahead of me. Scout, our adopted stray cat, slunk along behind the bloodhound. Following my animal escort, I silently thanked God that none of us had been hurt. The cat scooted under the bed used by Julian Teller, our former boarder, now a sophomore at the University of Colorado. Arch asked for a 3rd time what had happened. I didn't want to frighten him, so I lied. It just looks as if some drunk staggered up from the grisly saloon, took aim at our living room window, and shot it out. My son nodded slowly, not sure whether to believe me. I stared at the hands on Arch's new clock, a gift from his fencing coach. The clock was in the shape of a tiny knight holding a sword, from which a timepiece dangled. When the hands pointed to 4:25...
Sample complete. Ready to continue?